Guys, welcome to the 13th video in our 3D Racer game. In this video, I'm going to cover a bunch of different things. At the very beginning, I want to go ahead and make sure we finish cleaning up our second track. The predominant things that we need to fix are our beginning race, or start game trigger, and our half point trigger, and placing those in the right place. And also from there, adding some new music to this scene and making sure we remove all of our walls from the scene. I think I've already done this for mine, but I want to go ahead and point that out for you. So over here in the hierarchy, I had walls. You can see them from my last track. And because I went ahead and surrounded this entire track with these barriers, I don't really need these walls. So you can just turn those off or even delete them, which I'm going to do here. Control right click and delete my walls from this one scene. Make sure I save that. And since our track is built on triggering these different start triggers or half point triggers, I'm going to turn those on. So let me turn on my start trigger here. And, you know, it wasn't really set up for this level, but it's kind of interesting, you know, that I got it so close to the beginning without it, but still crooked. All right, let me adjust that. And of course, you're going to adjust that first. So that should just be 0, rotation of 0. And moving that forward to right about, let's see. I need to come up just a bit, right about there. All right, that one's done. And where's my half point trigger? Which is like on the moon, essentially. Let me move it up so I can see it a little bit better. So right about there, and done. Pretty simple stuff. We also want to change the music for this scene so that it is more reflective of, you know, a different scene. So let's do a new window here, and I'm going to keep using play on loop. I think we just downloaded some stingers from the other thing, but you know how to do this part here. Go ahead and find a. Let's see. I'm going to go action. All right, so I'm downloading that one, dragging it onto my desktop, and opening that zip up for me, going into my audio, music, and dragging that into here. And if I recall, that was a child of our car. Audio files, music, level music. Right here, and then dragging that back into here. So I'm going to save that. I don't need to test that for right now. And then for this scene as well, make sure that you have your enemy waypoints laid out the way you want them to. So waypoints, I've tuned mine to some degree. I've gotten rid of some. And the hard part I've found is just getting these corners right. My enemy sometimes will overcorrect and then like go into a wall. So I wanted to try to mess with the enemy car so that it doesn't. It just, you can fine tune it a little bit easier when it comes to the waypoints. And let's just talk about what the enemy car already has on it. It has this car AI controller script, and here we can make some changes about the way that this naturally works. Let me go back and fix that. Let me put my tracker object. Where did I put that bad boy? Where'd he go? Oh yeah, I want to reset its position to my first one, and then drag it out. Anyway, sorry, back on my EnemyCar one right here. So let's talk about what some of these things do and why they don't work for us. Because the standard car assets package has a right here, utility, has this thing called utility that has a bunch of scripts, then that would actually have a waypoint system already built for us with the waypoint circuit. Remember early on we're having the issue with the waypoint circuit. The problem is that they don't support this package anymore, and there's just weird issues that pop up. So that's the reason why we built our own waypoint system. Even though ours isn't as clean as the Unity one is, it works pretty well relative to what we normally might have, or the issues we might come across whenever we're doing the Unity waypoints. So this script here is kind of built to work around that because you have this waypoint progress tracker, and it has this sort of setup. So the way this is supposed to meant to work is you have caution speed, so where it starts slowing down, and how far away it should slow down, and what should cause you to start braking. So your braking distance, or your distance to the target, or there's a change of direction or things like that. And the thing that really would be helpful for us whenever you guys accidentally bypass your waypoint and it starts freaking out, is this reach target threshold. That within a certain distance, it would count it as having been reached. But since we're not using the utility part of this package, I was trying to think through the best way to do this, and I think that, honestly, the easiest way is via our tracker. On our tracker script, we're looking for an on-trigger enter event. So I think we should just play with the trigger, like the collider that you have set to its trigger, and just make it larger. So if you're having trouble with the enemy car reaching this point, then maybe try making your colliders a little bit larger and see if that helps clean up the way your car is getting around here. And I was playing with the mass of the enemy car earlier, and I'm just realizing that that's just not going to be the way to fix this, unfortunately. So it's still going to be kind of, I don't know, your player can knock it around a little bit, which makes it unfortunate. We don't really want them to like spam the enemy car so it can't go. But for now, I think just making your tracker objects collider a little bit bigger is going to fix some of the issues that you're seeing. The enemy is either running past a tracker point, so it's not hitting the box collider, or the player's bumping them and they're getting thrown off. And so an idea was to come up with a reverse script, a script that will check to see if the enemy is no longer moving forward, it can move backwards. I've tried a bunch of variations on this, and I'm honestly not really happy with any of them, but the one I'm going to show you is probably the best one that I've come up with thus far. And if you have suggestions, let me know. I'm totally down for making this a much better script. But I'll show you what I have. I'm going to go to my scripts folder and make a new C# script called EnemyReverse. Save that, make sure that the names match, which it does, and then open it up inside of Visual Studio. So the premise behind this script is going to be checking to see if I have forward motion, and if I don't have forward velocity, then making it move backwards, adding a force in a backwards fashion for a certain amount of time. So we're going to need, one, since we're looking at our cars script, I'm going to do using Unity standard assets dot vehicles dot car. In line 7, press return. Public. We're looking at the rigid body to, as checking its velocity. So actually, I'll call it enemy rigid body. And then I also want to get from the enemy car its car controller script. And I'm finding it easier just to do a get component. So I'm going to do public game object enemy car, and we'll get a component for that. I'm not going to be using the start, and instead I'm going to check this in the void fixed update at the very beginning of our update before we actually do any movement. So we're going to look for any forward motion, which is a float. We're looking at the z-axis. So float z velocity, and is equal to the transform dot inverse transform direction, and it wants to know which rigid body is it looking at, so which direction, and we're going to say it's the enemy rigid body dot velocity, and then which axis dot z outside of the argument. So the reason why we do this is it gets us our local velocity. If the world has a z-axis, there is a z direction for the entire world, but our car, its z doesn't always match that. If I turn left to right, its local idea of what forward is has changed. So this just takes its velocity on that axis opposed to looking at the world's velocity. All right, so if we ever stop moving, if we ever go to 0, and I'm actually going to make it equal to if z velocity is equal to less than or equal to 1. So I went with the less than or equals to 1 because it could be 0, but you know, by the time you're at 1, you're definitely going slow enough for it to be okay. So whenever this happens, we want to go get our car controller. So enemy car dot get component, and the name of the component is car controller. This is why we had to use the namespace of standard ss.vehicles.car, because we're referencing a specific script that's contained in there. At the after side of the carets, we open an argument. We don't need to add an argument, so we're just going to close that, period. And dot enabled equals false. So I'm turning off the forward motion that we get from the car controller this way. And I want to move back for a certain amount of time. I don't want it to just move back for one frame, like in an update. I want it to move back for a few seconds. So I need to keep up with time. And the easiest way to keep up with time is using time.delta time, which is actual seconds essentially. So I'm going to go line 10. And I want to keep up with a time count. So public float called time count. And I'm just making it public so I can see it. We're never really going to need to mess with that. So below here on line 20, time count plus equals time.delta time. So time.delta time is just like 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. And time count's going to keep count of that. It's basically going to be our clock. I'm going to press for if time count. So we want to say how many seconds we want to move backwards, and we're going to hold that as a public int. And I will say seconds to reverse. So how long to go backwards? So time count is ever less than seconds to reverse. This will say this is, so you should go backwards for this many seconds, and this is counting those number of seconds. Line 25, transform. I'm just going to do a transform.translate. This is where I had a lot of trouble because I tried adding forces. So vector 3, I'm going to go backwards here. Vector 3 dot back times. I need to have a reverse speed, don't I? Public int reverse force. This is how quickly I want to go backwards. So reverse force times time.delta time, since we're doing a dot translate. and semicolon. So this will move us backwards. But I tried adding forces and stuff, and it just was wild. I did force modes of all kinds of types, and this was the best version of this I got. So if and then else, if we're not above, if the time is not needing to run, we need to set it to 0. So it can reset after every time we go less than 1. So it can restart the count every time. Time count equals 0. All right, and then finally, outside of this statement, outside of this if statement, I need to make sure I turn back on the car component.getController here. Turn it back on. So after we start moving forward again, turn that to be true. And save that. Okay. So the problem is, let's go to our enemy car and add that script. There is a small problem with this. Enemy reverse. And I want to make sure I put the rigid body. Close some of these up so I can find it. There it is. The rigid body here. The game object itself into here. Time count is just for us to see. I say I want to back up like 2 seconds to back up. And a force of, I don't know, 100. I don't actually remember what the values were I used the first time I tried this. Save that. This script should be turned off at the beginning of the game because you start off at a 0, and so it's going to straight up start moving you backwards. So I think it's on our countdown script. Let me go find, what is that attached to? It says Start Manager? Yeah. On our countdown script, let's also make a reference to this script. So, we already have a reference to our enemy car, right? Yeah. No, we don't. I'm going to build one really quick. Public game object enemy car. And here, let's go enemy car dot get component. So this is when we get to 0. The name of the script was called EnemyReverse dot enabled. Oops, did I go the wrong line? Yeah. I don't know why I went to the next line. That was weird. Dot enabled equals true. You know what? Just to be safe, let me save this. I'm going to set enemy reverse just to be 0. If we ever just stop, because at the beginning of the game you're building up momentum, and I don't want to like trigger then. So I set that to 0. Okay. So it should be turned off. This needs to have a reference to our enemy car. Here. On our countdown script. And this please work. Okay. All right, that seems to be working okay. We're moving along here. I think I need to put an obstacle in front of my enemy car to test it out in just a second. So let's see if we can get it around the track. There you go. Oh, it I got knocked through the world. So maybe 200 is way too high. Reverse force. Maybe something like 10. Save that. So I'm going to try that and test that out again in 1 second. So let's add a obstacle right here towards the very beginning of the track. Let's see if that works. Plus create an empty. Oops, not empty. I want to get 3D object cube. 3D object cube. Let's just drag it up here. And stretch out the scale here on the X. Oops, not the X. See. Something like that. I might just move it back past this a little bit so it doesn't just collide. And I'll scale it on the Y some. And save that. Let's see what happens whenever our enemy car collides with it. Okay, so it did on the first go, actually. There it is. It's bumping back. Maybe it needs a little bit more force than 10. And it's supposed to be going back for the set period of time, which is a little concerning for me because it feels like it's just adding the force at one point. So, EnemyReverse Script. So seconds, if time count is less than seconds reverse. Oh, yeah. That was meant to do it. Yeah. Let's just try adding a little bit more force to it instead of just 10. Instead of like adding the force the entire time. Yeah, let's just see if that works. Try something like 50. Might get that same issue of clipping though if we add too much. Transform.translate tends to make an object ignore its ignore colliders. And that's why we gotta be careful with doing that. Oh, it's a little too much. But it did turn. Now it's getting stuck here. But it's probably a little too much. Something like 30. Try that one last time. Not an exact science, right? There you go. Helpful. Worked out. So, I mean, I've said this before. I wasn't super proud of this script. I don't think it's perfect. There's a lot of issues that can come out of it. But at the same time, I think it'll be very functional for what we're trying to do with this. So our next thing that we need to take care of is adding this level to our scene manager, and also adding it into our track selection. So I'm going to save this. Go back to scenes. And I just want to be in the track select scene here. So in our scene manager script, we basically were just calling the different tracks this way by making specific methods for them and then calling their index number from the scene manager. So I think we'll keep doing that. There's other ways to do this, right? We can just find the build index number and add to it or whatever, but this will be fine for how we're trying to approach this game. Let me go see file. Yep. Build settings. And I have not added my other track to the build settings yet. So let me do so. Scenes. And drag in 03 track 2, so it's the third one in here, to that array. Just go ahead and do that beforehand. And make that method here. So public void track 02. Well, helps to spell it correctly. Open, close argument. Open up these brackets, and then scene manager dot load scene, and the index value is 3. like that. And save that script. So let's go ahead and try to build our button. And there's going to be a small problem with just duplicating this, but I'll show you that in just a moment. So we will duplicate, and then we have to rework a little bit of what we've done, though. It's not too bad. So with our track 01 object selected in the hierarchy, I'm going to hit Command D, and I'm going to rename this to track 02. And before I move any further, I like to go ahead and change my on-click event, because I know I don't want to go to track 01. I want to go to the scene manager script and choose that new method we made called track 02. And save that. And I need to move it over, so I'm just going to drag it here on the x-axis over to right about halfway here. And while we're here, I already went back into my scene for track 02 and turned my lighting back down, the intensity of the directional light, that all the stuff I turned up so I can make the level, and also make sure I got some more lights out where I wanted them to be, and so I could take a screenshot to use for our button right here. I want to go ahead and tell you that I still haven't gotten any answers regarding the lighting issue with it blinking in and out. So I'm going to try to post on the Unity Discord and see if I get some answers soon. But that still hasn't been resolved yet. So after taking my photo, I drag that photo into I believe I put in UI, yes. And I changed it to a sprite 2D. And under my track 02 button, raw image, put it right into here. There we go. And then change the name. So I went to the text object, that's a child of the button, and I called it Night Depot. That's just the name I came up with. So here's the problem with just duplicating this button, is if I press play, you'll see it fairly instantly. So this looks good. And this right here is attempting to go back to the position it was originally, because the animation on it, so open a minute, when I go to highlight it, it still inherits its animation from the controller that's attached to this first one. It's the same controller, so that the positions are going to be the same. It wants to go to the same positions. So it's the issue is that the controller that's attached is the same one. If we make changes to this now, it'll change this one too. So we need to make another controller. And the easiest way to do that is to come over here to the animator and go to none. When you select none, this will give us an option again to generate those animations. So I'm going to hit auto generate animation. And I want these to be my animation, my button anims, and I'm just going to call this track 02 button anim. I call the first one track select anim. I wish I named it track 01, but I wasn't really thinking ahead far enough when I did that. So I'm going to hit save, and we should see a new controller here. And in our projects, assets, animation, button anims, we should see the new animation controller, and it has already built in these different states for us. And so before I do anything, I want to go ahead and make sure that I know we're going to be doing our highlighted one. I want to take off the loop time so it doesn't repeat it over and over. And I think it was select it, turn off the loop time on that. And we need to build those again. So I'm just going to look at my track 01 and see what my animations look like. So go to my animation panel, and for highlighted, we were changing, if I look over here, I think it was the position. Yes, so the position on the Y was changing from a -44 or -50 to a -12 at 40 seconds. Or, yeah. Not 40 seconds, but whatever. 2/3 of a second. And then -50 again here. So let me do that with my track 02. Switch this to highlight it. Make sure I hit record before I change anything. And I can go ahead and change it. So that was like a -50. So it kind of jumped down just a little bit. And then at 2/3 of a second, it was like -12, I believe. And then at 1, -50 again. So I had it drop just a little bit when you first select it to kind of give it that bump and get out of recording. And then for select it, so I'm going to track 0, 1. I got to remember what that one looked like. That was a scaling, I believe. Yeah, so the beginning, we're at like 0.75 on the X scale and 2.75. And then halfway, so half a second in, it was 1.3. So go to track 0, 2, switch to select it, hit record, and change that scaling. So the very beginning, 0.75. I'm going to hit tab to move over. 2.75 for the Y. And, you know, Z, since we're sort of using 2D, we don't really need to mess with the Z. I'm moving over to the 1 second, and it should be back to 1 and 3. And get out of recording and save that. And let me press play to see if that works. Okay, that one's working, and that one's working. And you see when I like get off of it, it like snaps back. That's what that little 0.5 thing did. I'm sorry, 50 versus -44 for the height. So that looks I think that looks well. And it should switch to our other track. So something that was requested was changing our background when we hovered over each one of these. And it's a little bit more complicated than you anticipate, but we can go ahead and do that. I originally wanted like you can rotate a camera through the scene, and maybe that's something I can do later on, but for now I really just want to get it to switch back and forth between the different ones. So I went ahead and renamed this terrain here from the first one that's already in our background to track 01 terrain manager, and I did it because we're going to put the terrain manager from each one of these scenes in the background. So I went ahead and renamed that track 01, and then I went to, let's go into my scenes, track 02, and I took my environment from up here, and I made and I put my terrain manager from this scene inside of the environment, because the terrain on this one is pretty flat and it doesn't have anything on it. Like the other one, the feature was the hills and all that, and this one's more about the objects that we put in, like our buildings and so forth. So, I can actually turn off some of these colliders. That might be a good idea eventually. It might help with performance a little bit. We should probably consider going back and doing that pretty soon. Anyways, so I put them all inside of the environment, and I prefabbed that. So prefab, and I drug it in, and I called it track 02 environment. So this has the terrain and all the objects in it. So going back to scene or track select here, and going into my prefabs folder, if I drag in track 02 environment, and I kind of like to keep things like ordered here. It's also now in the scene. I want to turn off the first one so I can position it. So turn that off. And it kind of snaps it to 0, 0, 0 in the corner. So I need to move this thing around. Now note, because the way that the terrain is set up and these environments are sort of like separate objects, that if I try to rotate this, let's just say I did a rotation here, the environment objects and the terrain are going to rotate differently. So it's kind of weird the way that works, right? So I'm just going to move it and get it into a good position for our camera to see, our buildings and so forth. So I'm going to scoot that over and here. Move it up some. Drop it on the Y a little bit. And I want to see more of the actual track area, but I don't want to lose that. And I think that looks pretty good for what we're scene. So the problem is that this no longer has the nighttime skybox, nor does it have the lights going down, and it's just in the world. So what I want to do is I'm going to turn this one off again, and I'm just going to leave them both off here, and we're going to build a new script. I try to figure out a way to contain switching back and forth between one script, but I've been unsuccessful. So we're going to have to build a new script for each one of these buttons. But once we make one, the other one will be very easy to make. So I'm going to go into scripts. I'm going to create a new C# script, and I'm going to call this track 01 selection. Yeah, I think that's the way to name that. We might even come in and put some new folders to help clean this up just a little bit. So give it here. I'm going to open this up. So this is going to be using a new type of a new thing in scripting we haven't done before. So for this one, I actually don't need lines 1 and 2. We're not going to use system collections for this script here, or the generic. I'm going to move that up a little bit. And we're going to use 2 more new namespaces. So we are using Unity Engine. We're also going to be using Unity Engine dot events. So let's talk about what this is going to be. Whenever we hover over this button, since it's in the UI, we're not using a mouse, it's using the pointer itself. It's looking for an event. So we call these things that occur on the UI events. So we don't need to, we're not object oriented at this point. We're not looking at objects, we're looking at placement on the screen. So that's why we're going to be using the, oops, where did it go? Where did that script go? I'll just double click here. I don't know where you went. Okay. Oh, it's all the way down here. We're using the event system. And so we need to do that in the next line too. Using Unity Engine dot event systems. So this is what, how we build. Basically, things that happen in the UI that already have scripts like the button script. This is what it uses here. So we have a public class called track01 selection. Now, after this, we've never done this before. We're going to put the letter I, capital I, and you get this whole list of things called interfaces. Now, interfaces, I don't want to go too deep into this, but interfaces are another way to get information from other scripts. So usually we do something called inheriting, where you find another script and then you look for a specific method, and then you pull that information out by referencing the method. This is a direct correlation. This is a peer-to-peer. It's not up and down. And the way that it looks, it's looking across. And so another script that's already been built for us inside of Unity, it's an interface, already has some information like how to do dragging and dropping. We never have to build these scripts. And so the way for us to access these is using the letter I to interface with that other script. So we're going to use an I pointer enter handler. So this interface handles when pointers enter things. They've built it up for that. So comma. And why am I getting an error right now? Good question. I don't know. We'll figure that out in a second. I bet I can figure it out. Pointer exit handler as well. That is interesting. So I think we have to be using it though. Like sort of our start and update here. Maybe that will help. I think, yeah, actually it doesn't know that we're going to be using it. So I'll go ahead and build the methods that are going to use it. So public void. It is a method still. On pointer enter. Curious. I think we have to go here. Pointer event data. There it is. Yeah, event data. I forgot that it takes a little while to get that. And then we need to open up this method. Okay. So the problem with I don't want to say the problem. Something that's worth noting is that when you use interfaces, you have to use already pre-made methods. We couldn't name this anything else because the method is already contained within this interface on another inside of Unity. It's already self-contained. So you have to know this language for it to work. And event data is just a variable name given to the information that we get when the pointer enters this. So we can access a lot of different types of information about when our pointer goes onto an object in the UI. And let's go ahead and add our exit event too, our exit method, which is on pointer exit. And we're still going to be using the pointer event data and still try to use that same variable name here. Okay. So let's think through what we need. There's going to be a couple things that need to happen. First, we want to turn on and off these game objects. So I'm going to hold both of these. When the game first comes in, we want to already have the autumn track set up. So public game object, and the name of this game object is, let's just call it track 01 terrain. And I apologize if the variable names get a little crazy here, but I want to be specific enough that I know exactly what these are meant to be. And we want to also make sure that the second one gets turned off. 02 terrain. Okay. So when we enter, let's go ahead and add this event. We want to take our track 01 terrain dot set active and make that true. And if we already have the second track on, let's just go make sure that it's turned off. Because say we've been on the second button, we've had that one on. When we leave, yeah, we need to go ahead and turn that one off, just to be sure. Okay. So let's save that. And let's just get this set up, and then we can add more things from there. Just for testing purposes, I'm going to go ahead and have track 01 turned off. Okay. Saved. Let me go to my canvas, track 01 button, close this up here, and I'm going to add component, and we called it track 01 selection. I need to put our terrain manager in and for both of them, and press play. So right now nothing's in the world, but if I move down, it should turn it on for me. All right, awesome. And nothing is occurring on the exit yet. Sweet. We want it to stay like that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and leave this on because I just did that for testing purposes, but we want the game to already have this. And now I'm just realizing I don't have any wind zones in this scene. I want to put a wind zone in here so that it moves around. I should do that. So save. And let's go back into that track 01 selection. So another thing we want to do is change our skybox. Yeah. So the skybox material, I have my lighting panel already open here. So what skybox do I already have in this scene? Let me look. Environment. Skybox 06 is the one we have. Okay. So every time I put this scene in, I need to make sure Skybox 06 is loaded. So if I go to Assets, and I think it was in our Textures folder, Classic Skybox, Skybox 6. Okay. So this is a material. So we need to access our Skybox, our render settings. So this is our renderer, .skybox, and change the material. This is actually a little more simpler than you would think it would be. I keep losing the script. Where does it keep going? Curious. So let's go to our button. And I'm just going to open it up again. I don't know why I keep losing that thing. All right. So let's go ahead and line 8, press return, public material, capital M material. So that's the name of the variable. So change of materials, pretty straightforward. It's not too bad. Let's call this track 01 skybox matte. And let's go ahead and reference the other one because we want to turn that one off. So we're going to have another one for the second one. Track 02 sky box matte. Remember, using proper camel casing here. So when we enter, we want to make sure that track 01 skybox matte dot. Oh, you know what? I got this wrong. Sorry. I have to access render settings. Render settings here. So the settings in our camera, or what's being sent to our camera, dot skybox equals, and we just tell it to become track. We just set it like this. That should be okay. We're gonna. Actually, I don't think I need this reference on this script. I tried to write it earlier using both in the same one, and I was trying to reference this. I don't think I need that one because it's only when it enters, it'll just switch it over. Okay. Pointer exit. I don't think I need an exit event for this, do I? I don't think I do, now that I'm thinking about it. No, I don't think we do. Well, let's just go ahead and finish this out. And the last thing is I want to go ahead and make sure that the light in the world on the directional lighting is set to the right lighting. So directional lighting, and I want to make sure the intensity. So the intensity here right now is just 1. Yeah, and I didn't play with the color. I left the color alone in both scenes, which is good. I want them to be the same if possible. I don't think I did. We can go check that. So here, I'm going to go to public, and I'm going to reference a light. So this is how we do lighting. And I'm just going to call it directional light 01. Or no, I'll call it, yeah, just 01. And that number is stored as a float. It's a decimal, so you can go from 0.1. So I need to have a public float called directional intensity. Sweet. And here on pointer enter, let's just make sure that we change the directional intensity. Directional light. Sorry, 01 dot intensity to be equal to this new directional intensity float, this value here, and save that. I don't think I need the exit handler. Maybe I will. I'm just gonna leave it alone for now. And note, just like with our cameras, I went ahead and set the first terrain true before I turned the other one off, just so that we always have something in the background here. I wanted to point that out. All right, so I'm going to come back into Unity. I saved. I got to add this to. I already added it to my button here. Let's go ahead and assign the track 01 material. So in our textures folder, classic skybox. Boom. It was sky 06, and it needs a reference to our light, directional light here, and we want it to be 1. So save that. And right now, of course, we're not going to see any difference because this is the settings that we currently have. But you know what? I need to go to my other scene. Let's see what skybox we use. Let's see what the intensity of the light is. So, scenes. Oh, I saved, by the way. Make sure make sure you do that. Track 02. Go to lighting. I'm using. So this was in the Fantasy Skybox free one. So this is a little bit different. I'm going to write this down on a piece of paper next to me, so I get it right. Night 01. Okay. And scene, directional lighting. Inspector. Lighting is the same. My intensity here is 0, so I went straight 0. Okay, good to know. All right, back into my track selection. Scene. Okay, go to scripts. And you know, I'm going to just try to duplicate this. It's going to create an error for us, but I'm going to change the name in a second. So I'm going to command. Can I just straight up duplicate? Yeah, I can duplicate, which is going to create a problem for us. So track 01, select 1. I'm going to control right click, rename, and get rid of that 1 at the end, and then change it to track 02, select, press return. Now the name of the script doesn't match, so it would be track 02 selection, and save that. Get a chance to compile. Go to my console. It should clear this out. Yeah, there you go. It should clear that out for us. All right, so track 02 selection. I'm going to go to my track 02 button, add that script, track 02 selection. But I need to change some of the information inside of it. So when this one enters, I want to switch this. I want track 02. Let's do it like this. I'm going to cut this, put it above, paste, set this to true because I want to have it turned on before the other one, and then set track 01 terrain to be false. Save, and I'm going to change the name of this to track 02 skybox mat, and change it down here so that we have a dedicated thing spot for that. And then directional light 2. This isn't the, I didn't have to do all this detailed stuff, but save that right there. But I wanted to make sure I went through and have dedicated spots so I can make sure that I'm always on the right script. It's just helpful to be descriptive. So on track 02, it needs to know the terrain for 1 here, the terrain for 2 here, the material. So I think it was it Pixel Skybox? No, I gotta remember where I put this stuff. Good thing I wrote it down. It was like FS000 underscore night 01. I think this is it right here. Okay. So let me go back to track 2. There's that slot there, and this should be it here. And then my directional light, it wants to know which one in the scene, which is this one here. And then the intensity is 0. So this should work. Let's press play. All right, hover over this one. Looks good. Hover over this one. Switches. Over this one again. Switches back and forth. There you go. That's how we switch them back and forth using something called interfaces to control our UI canvas. So guys, I apologize. This is a long video and it wasn't as clean as I'd hoped it would be, but I think it adds some cool functionality to the game. And I will see you in the next video.